So I don't know if you saw, but we've got a pretty big update from Latvia. And that is a Russian drone, a fully armed Shahed, which are these Iranian drones, long-range drones that they pack with explosives. They sound like tractors flying over your house, and then they fly over long distances before hitting targets. They're slower, they're more likely to be intercepted, but they're also much easier to make. And the original models came from the Iranians, and now they're making them domestically in Russia. But Latvia is saying that while most of these, of course, falling in Ukraine, and a few have found themselves in Moldova or in Romania or maybe in Poland, Latvia doesn't really make all that sense. Let's read a little bit about the story, and then I'll tell you why I'm a little confused. Latvia's armed forces on Monday said the Russian drone that crashed on the Baltic states' territory was an Iranian-designed Shahed equipped with explosives. Riga had earlier announced that investigators were looking into a drone that had crashed in the eastern part of the country on Saturday. Latvia, which was once ruled by the Soviet Union but is now an EU and NATO member, has had tense relationship with Moscow following independence, and ties have further deteriorated since Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. The explosive warhead stuck half a meter deep in the ground and was neutralized on the spot, avoiding destruction, Latvian Armed Forces Commander General Leonid Kalniņš told a press conference. This allowed our military intelligence officers to gather all the debris and remnants from the drone for further investigation. Because of the ongoing investigation, the general did not specify how and when the drone was deactivated. Latvian Air Force commander said the drone was not aimed at a military target in our country. It sort of drifted into Latvia. The drone was seen by our air defense while still deep in the Belarusian airspace, which gave us time to react. Defense Minister Andrej Spruds said the army had already dispatched additional mobile anti-aircraft units to Latvia's borderlands. Latvian President Edgars Rinkēvičs had said Sunday that the airspace breaches had increased along NATO's eastern border. Romania on Sunday said a Russian drone attack targeting civilian infrastructure in Ukraine had entered its airspace overnight. Fellow NATO member Poland has also recorded at least 2 cases of its airspace being violated by Russian missiles or drones attacking Ukraine, most recently in December. Now, what the Latvian Air Force claims is that the Russian drone seemed to have entered Ukraine, and from what they say about Belarusian airspace, it would mean that it entered Ukraine from Russia, and then after entering Ukraine, it then drifted into Belarus, then went through the entirety of Belarus, and if we're talking about the length of Belarus, from this end to this end, it's like, let's see. We're talking about 560 kilometers of distance on top of the distance that was made in Ukraine and from Russian territory before finally arriving around here in this area in the eastern part of Latvia, where there also happens to be the most Russian speakers. The drone fell and hit nothing in particular. Now, that is quite a large distance from targets in Ukraine. See, if you're in, like, I don't know, Moldova, you could see how, okay, a drone flies. It was aiming for a target in Odessa. It misses Odessa. It then goes and strikes like a village here, or a home around the border. You can see how that works. You can see the pathway logic. You could probably do the same thing in Poland, right along this area. And there have been some close calls in this area. You could do the same thing in Romania down here if you're trying to strike targets deep into Western Ukraine around Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv, Ternopil, or other areas, Vinnytsia, any of the other areas in Western Ukraine. But when you go up to Latvia, that's not even close. I mean, where would it have to go from? What would it be hitting? What would the target range be? What's the pathway logic? Because if it's coming from up here and it was drifting down, it would be hitting these. So presumably it was coming from Rostov-on-Don or from this direction, or it's really hard to say, but where exactly it came from. But the scenario would be that Russia launched a drone into Ukraine, from which direction we don't know, Rostov-on-Don, Kursk, let's just say Rostov-on-Don for, argument's sake, and then crosses, I don't know, about 1,000 kilometers of land, then crosses into Belarus, then crosses another 600 kilometers of land before then hitting Latvia. Is it impossible? No. Is it likely? No. But it also only happened once. So, I mean, if you have a war going on for 3 years almost, the chances of spillover does increase the longer the war goes on. So I don't want to I'm willing to suspend my disbelief a little bit, but that is really, really out of the way. And I do also want to throw out there that on top of, the drone incidents across all these different countries and some missile incidents, there have also been close calls in the Black Sea. I remember an American drone getting knocked down by a Russian jet, and that being a diplomatic incident. And if the United States and Europe does not want a war with Russia, as I assume they don't, and I assume something also probably similar with the Russians, that they don't want a war with Europe because probably would not go well if they're having so much trouble with Ukraine, fighting all of Europe and the United States at the same time would probably make it a lot harder. Not a winning strategy. But on the other hand, even if Russia doesn't want a war, they do want to maybe escalate in a way to stave off European or American support to Ukraine, and possibly open the door or possibilities for further provocations down the line. Because if a Russian drone is to, say, accidentally explode in Moldova, what is an Article 5 violation? Because an explosion over Moldova, if that doesn't count as an attack on Moldova, with 2 explosions, 3 explosions, 4 explosions, what if you could claim they weren't on purpose? At what point are you normalizing such activities? At what point are you normalizing spillovers? At one point, could you say something, you've normalized it so much, you could do a strike targeting a Moldovan factory or targeting something that could be important, hitting it and then saying oopsie doopsie. And at that point, if you've already had Moldova hit 12, 13, 14, 15 times and you're a Western diplomat, are you really going to start something over the 15th or 16th time, even if this one seemed to be just a little bit more accurate than the previous ones? It puts you in a dilemma, because nobody wants to start war over one drone hitting Moldova. No one wants to start war over one drone hitting Poland or any of these countries. But if there was 150 to 200 drones at the same time, some could maybe assume that it was a massive attack. So instead, it's a drip feeding. Assuming, of course, that some of this was done purposefully. And this is the thing that concerns me, is that if the Russians, because I'm already concerned about this generally when it comes to Poland and when it comes to Romania and when it comes to Moldova, but now it's spreading into a new country. This is the 4th country it's happening now in. It's happening now in Latvia as well. How many countries are we going to have Russian drones hit or bomb or otherwise, strike in some way or enter their airspace? We've even had instances of Russian munitions entering Polish airspace before turning around and hitting Ukrainian targets. That is, utilizing Polish airspace to target locations in Ukraine. At what point do you try to draw lines in the sand, quote unquote, red lines? I know red lines is risky behavior for both Obama and Putin, who have neither of them have had a particularly successful past with them. I don't know if Biden will have a successful future. He only has 6 months if he wanted to try it anyway. But if you wanted to wear down this norm, is this not how you would do it? But then you don't want to create a gigantic incident out of one drone bombing, because nobody wants to start a war over just like one drone bombing. So what do you do? And that's the dilemma that European leaders are facing right now. They don't want a war with Russia. They don't want to spiral out a crisis from it. But on the other hand, if they just let them keep letting the war spill over into other countries, if the war keeps spilling over, or even purposeful provocations hidden in the veil of military actions against Ukraine in order to whittle down the norms around this, something will have to be done. I mean, Article 5 should not just be something to dissuade a full-scale invasion. There should be no comfort in striking Polish or Latvian or any NATO-covered or really any European city from the Russians, period. Or from anyone, really. So I just wanted to throw out there my little bit of speculation. And I am saying this is all speculation. And I want to be clear about that, because right now I am just openly voicing my concerns. This is not like a deep down report. That this seems very suspicious, This seems super off course, and it makes me question whether this was an accident, whether this was purposeful, and whether there might be another purpose behind something like this. A different diplomatic purpose, if not just to remind the Latvians how close they are to the Russians. More things to discuss, more things to talk about.